So in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about why does Dan Pena talk about religion, ethnicities, and families in his £27,000 seminar. So why does he talk about these three things? And when I first entered into the seminar, I've done two of his seminars. One of them is the Quantum Leap Advantage seminar, and the other one is a Quantum Leap Advantage hardcore seminar. And both of these costed about £20,000 when I did it. And they cost a little bit more than that. I believe one of them is around 27,000 now. The price has been increased. And not only that I went to the Castle seminar, I implemented the information. I implemented the business model in UAE, and I managed to bring together some of the very high-powered individuals, including former CEO of a $3.5 billion public company who has been around Obama and Richard Branson. So I'm going to be talking about why does Dan Pena keep talking about ethnicities, religion, and families in a seminar that's supposed to be about business. So when I went to his seminar, I was just confused. Why is he talking about families so much? Why is he talking about religion so much? Why is he talking about ethnicities so much? It's a week-long seminar and it's extremely effective. Why is there a segment dedicated for this subject? And initially I did not understand, but slowly he started to unfold and I could get a gist of it, but I really saw it at play when I was on the court executing, and how my mind and my programming started to come in the way. And one of the reasons why he talks about these things is because our entire mental framework and our entire behavioral framework, the decisions that we take, is based upon the programming that have been instilled into us through religion, family, and ethnicity. And this is done through the school system, where the government influences the type of material you consume in textbooks, and what you watch on the TV, the types of movies. They always have some element of religion in it, some teachings, some element of culture and tradition in it. Every home these days has a temple. There are beliefs which have been programmed since you're very, very young, and I know this since I'm very young. If you go outside into the neighborhood, there's typically a church or a temple. What kind of conversations are happening there. All of this influences and shapes the way we think. And I did not understand to what extent this influenced me. I just thought that this is just me consuming information, and it really doesn't have any effect on me. It only has effect if I allow it to have effect on me. It's not going to have effect otherwise. But that's not true, because these beliefs were programmed at such a young age. They continue to influence you. And another thing I thought was that a person learns from first-hand experiences, which is you do something, you make a mistake, you learn from it, you move on. And that process repeats, and that's how your mind is shaped. That's what I used to believe. I know now that most of the stuff that we learn is not from first-hand experience. We learn from our parents and people around us. We are just copying them. We are just copying the way they think, the way they act, the way they talk. All of it is just copied. We don't have any evidence to what they believe is even true. And these beliefs could be coming from many generations and through ancestors. And they haven't been fact-checked. There's little or no evidence to it, but those types of programmings are there. For example, I did not believe that I could get a CEO of a $3.5 billion company at the age of 26 without having a college degree. I could talk to him, present a case within 15-20 minutes, and get him to get into a business partnership with me. That is not something that I even heard about. None of the people in my family had ever done it. None of the people in my neighborhood had ever done it. None of the friends that I had, their parents had ever done it. The people that they knew haven't done it. I mean, I didn't know anybody online who was in the same position that I was, who had done it. And because I did not have any evidence of this being done, it wasn't a possibility for me. I wasn't even thinking about it. And that is one of the examples where, because you don't have evidence of something, you think it doesn't exist, or you think that it's not going to happen. You know, even when I did it, even when this person signed the papers, I still could not get people to believe this. So I had to actually take pictures for people to believe it. And even when I showed them the pictures, it was kind of like they didn't want to believe it, but now the picture is in front of them, so they have to believe it. Then I showed videos. Then I showed, make them listen to voice notes that this person had sent me. Nothing confidential was in those voice notes, but just general voice notes. And then they started to believe, like, how is this possible? How did you do this? And there are many things about the QLA model that is not going to fit into the framework of the mind, is not going to fit into the programming. And when something doesn't fit into the programming, you will either have resistance or complete disbelief, where you will not even execute on the information. For example, when we came back home, my brother kept plaguing me with this negative thought process, is that why would a CEO of $1 billion company partner up with us? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But just because it doesn't make sense logically, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and it doesn't mean it's not possible. Things happen in our lives that we have never done ever, and they happen. So that's a simple example of how the programming gets in the way. And it's more related to business than I thought it was. Another example, one of the family traditions that we had is never take debt to do business. First, never get into business. If you get into business, get into a small business. If you do get into a small business, never borrow money. And this is something that I investigated with my family members. I went and interviewed, what were your beliefs about money? And I started to write down. And one of the beliefs was that don't make more than you need, make a little bit extra for a rainy day, but too much greed is not good. This was a belief that my grandmother and grandfather had. Whatever the money that you make surplus, just give it away or don't receive it. So I started to check my bank account at that time. I had just enough and a little bit extra. So it was exactly identical. My whole behavior was around this belief. And I started to investigate more and more. And they said, never get into business, don't take debt. And anytime I had to talk about raising capital, I would have fear in my mind. I would have, if I make too much money or if I'm talking about money, I would feel guilt. If I'm negotiating a deal and asking more for myself, I would feel guilt. I remembered the moral books that I read in school. There used to be these moral books for kids where there were many stories illustrating why you should not be greedy. So when I was raising capital, these weird emotions started to come up, that don't do this, this is not good, this is not right. And I was like, what the hell is this? I'm raising capital to buy a business. It's perfectly, legitimate. Like, why am I having these deep down subconscious level thoughts? And it took months and a few years for the programming to work itself out and to kind of disappear and let me be. And it started to happen when I started to identify this, because I started to interview my family members. I started to make a list of all the books that I read in school, and I started to uncover what is my underlying thought process, what is my underlying belief. Why don't I believe something is possible? Nobody in my whole family would have negotiated a $10 million with a $10 million company. Nobody in my family has negotiated with a $1 billion public company. I've negotiated with a $1 billion public company. I didn't even believe that they would take a meeting with me, but I would just push myself to send an email, and I would get sick to my stomach, but I would still send the email. I would get sick to my stomach when I would be making the phone call, because you start to feel that you're attempting the impossible. And all of this is shaped by the programming. That's why a significant portion of the seminar is dedicated towards mental programming and childhood conditioning, because you learn from people around you, you learn from the books that you've been exposed to, movies that you've been exposed to, and media is controlled, school books are controlled. You come back home, religious books have been infiltrated also. You know, if there is in the olden times when the king wanted to send a message, instead of speaking directly that this is coming from the king, they would change the text in the religious books, that okay, God said this, you know, and the priest would translate that okay, this is the message from God, you should not be too greedy, you know, and pave the way for the king. You know, only the king can be greedy, rest of the subjects cannot be greedy. So there were these beliefs that were sort of supplied, you know, misinformation, false information that shapes the mind. And all of us have been subjected to false information, false belief patterns, and a lot of the things that we believe are not possible are actually possible. And there is only one way to find out, is by taking action and doing the uncomfortable, making that presentation, asking for that raise, you know, going for that high paid salary that none of the family members probably in around you have been able to secure that. You may be the first one to do it. You may be the first one to do so many things, right? You may be the first one to do things that none of your friends, their parents and their friends have not done. And so this is really about removing all the limits placed by the society. And I didn't understand how important this was when I started to confront these things. I remember I was at this fine dine restaurant where I was sitting with the bankers asking for $10 million facility financing, and I'd never done it. And the thing that was going in my head was, what if they ask me about my degree? You know, what if they ask me, what did I study in college or university, or did I do a degree, right? Because that's the thing that's valued in my family. That's the first thing they would ask in the social gatherings. You know, what are you studying? And what are you going to study next? And what degree do you have? Degree and certificates were everything. But in today's world, it doesn't matter. You know, degree doesn't produce cash flow. Degree is not going to give the banker the security over the loan. Degree is not going to pay the interest. Degree is not going to pay his bonus. He's not even thinking about that. He's thinking about what risk is there in the business, what is the cash flow, and how much debt are they taking, over how many years it's going to be structured, what's going to be the interest, and how can I make some money. That's what the banker is thinking. He's not concerned about my degree. But the whole lunch, I had this thought in my head about the degree, and I just couldn't focus, and it was hard for me to focus, and I wanted to puke, and it was just a very weird experience. And that's when I started to get present. Okay, I think I know what Dan meant, you know, by programming, by subconscious mind, by your reality is shaped by the kind of exposure that you have had. And your exposure may be too limited. You know, how many places a person goes in his lifetime. You know, a lot of the people just from home, they go to work and they kind of stay in one neighborhood. From time to time they travel, but the circle of exposure is very small. They haven't been exposed to, you know, $1 million deals, and these $1 million deals are happening in very private setting. You know, these negotiations take place in a very private setting. They don't hit the newspapers, and they don't hit even online, there is no news about it. The types of deals that I negotiated, these are, you meet in a restaurant and you're having a conversation. Nobody really knows about it. There is no media coverage that's looking into our transactions. These are highly confidential transactions and conversations, and they're happening all over the city. and only the public company data is, covered by the media. But the private companies, and most of the market is composed of private companies, all of that data, there is no way to account for that. How are you going to account for two people having a conversation? So these types of things are not in the media. These types of things are not discussed in the family. How are you going to know? I remember I spoke to a CFO of a hospital, and I told him that we will be doing leverage buyouts, meaning you put the business as collateral to get financing. And he said that leverage buyouts don't happen in this region. And I was like, how can this guy know? Has he looked into, is he aware of all the deals that are happening? How is this possible? You can't possibly Google this stuff. You cannot be part of every deal. So how does he know? He doesn't know. He's just assuming it. And then I met one of the top law firms, and they said that they did a $350 million leverage buyout in the region. So, so that's a classic example of something that falls out of the framework and people just have a disbelief. So that's one of the reasons why Dan Pena talks about ethnicities, religion, and family programming and conditioning, and how you are raised and how that affects your behavior in business. Another thing that I was facing while I was negotiating is, why are you asking for so much? This is too much for yourself. You should not ask too much for yourself. You should share. You should share the profits. And if I really literally share the profits too much, the deal would become too much risky for me, for my company. But that's at the back of the mind, the thought process, and you may squeak something out during the conversation that you shouldn't say, and you'd realize how much not in control you are, and how much the programming is actually running you and running your mind. And it's a scary feeling, because you feel that you're run by these programs that are not in your control. And then slowly, as you get present to it, you can bring it under control. You can start seeing it as a programming, that this is my programming, this is not real. What I'm experiencing is in my head. It's not happening outside of me. The banker is not thinking about my degree. The banker is just happening in my head, in my mental space. And once you get present to that, the programming has a distance, and you can do the task that you can do. So that's one of the reasons why Dan Pena covers this as a part of the seminar, probably because over the last 20-25 years, he would have seen people showing disbelief and facing this challenge, this mental block that a lot of the people have. And you can check for yourself if you have some of these sort of tendencies and programming that were instilled by family, ethnicities, and religion. So that's today's video, and I'll talk to you soon.